Senate Committee Room, C 311. This is the Senate of Virginia, Richmond, Virginia. This is the Senate of Virginia, Richmond, Virginia. Senate Committee Room, C 311. Did you know live Senate video is now available at youtube.com/@Senate of Virginia. Senate Committee Room, C-311. This is the Senate of Virginia, Richmond, Virginia. This is the Senate of Virginia, Richmond, Virginia. Senate Committee Room, C-311. Did you know live Senate video is now available at youtube.com/@Senate of Virginia. Senate Committee Room, C 311. This is the Senate of Virginia, Richmond, Virginia. This is the Senate of Virginia, Richmond, Virginia. Senate Committee Room, C 311. Did you know live Senate video is now available at youtube.com/@Senate of Virginia? Senate Committee Room, C-311. This is the Senate of Virginia, Richmond, Virginia. This is the Senate of Virginia, Richmond, Virginia. Senate Committee Room, C-311. Did you know live Senate video is now available at youtube.com/@Senate of Virginia. Senate Committee Room, C-311. This is the Senate of Virginia, Richmond, Virginia. This is the Senate of Virginia, Richmond, Virginia. Senate Committee Room, C-311. Did you know live Senate video is now available at youtube.com/@Senate of Virginia. Senate Committee Room, C-311. This is the Senate of Virginia, Richmond, Virginia. This is the Senate of Virginia, Richmond, Virginia. Senate Committee Room, C-311. Did you know live Senate video is now available at youtube.com/@Senate of Virginia? Senate Committee Room, C311. This is the Senate of Virginia, Richmond, Virginia. This is the Senate of Virginia, Richmond, Virginia.
Good morning and welcome to the first meeting of the Affordable Housing Solutions Landlord and Tenant and Real Estate Law Group Work Group. We will begin with a call to order and a welcome. I'm so grateful to have you all here. I'm going to now pass it over. Do we need to take attendance?
You need to take it.
Okay, we'll stop and we'll take attendance.
Actually, maybe you just have people do their own
You want introductions?
Yes, please.
Okay, well, we're going to start with introductions. My apologies. And we will start to the far right.
Hi, Troy Garrett with the Virginia Association of Housing and Community Development Officials.
Kelly Kinghorn with Homeward and the Greater Richmond Continuum of Care.
Andrew Clark with the Home Builders Association of Virginia.
Bisma Ahmed with the Apartment and Office Building Association and the Virginia Apartment Management Association.
Kelly Harris Braxton, Virginia First Cities Coalition.
Delegate Adele McClure, I represent HD2, which encompasses parts of Arlington.
Elizabeth Pollen with the Virginia Housing Commission.
Mamie Locke, representing the 23rd Senate District and Chair of the Housing Commission.
Monique Johnson, Virginia Housing.
Bob Bradshaw, Independent Insurance Agents of Virginia.
Christy Mara, Virginia Poverty Law Center.
I'm Randy Grumbine, representing the factory-built housing industry.
Erin Corman, representing Virginia Realtors.
Wonderful. Thank you, everyone, for being here in attendance. And I am Delegate Brianna Sewell. As you'll see from today's agenda, we have quite a robust agenda. That being said, we have allocated 2 hours for today's meeting, as there is another work group that will be meeting at 1 p.m. So therefore, we're going to ask for everyone to be very timely in their presentations. We have dedicated a certain amount of time for each presentation, and we will discuss that a little later once we actually get underway with today's agenda. But before we do so, we have a few remarks from our director, Elizabeth Palin.
Good morning, all. Welcome. Well, we have some good presentations, and we'll begin to tackle a few of the issues that have been assigned to the Affordable Housing Solutions Landlord, Tenant, and Real Estate Law Work Group. Some of these issues may lead to a resolution today. Others will just begin and study thoroughly through the interim. I'm going to start you all off with a couple of quick facts about the state of housing sales and single-family starts in the Commonwealth. These numbers are the newest available numbers. The statewide median sales price was $425,000 in April, which shows an increase of $8,000, which is a 2% increase since the median household income of last year. The median household income for a family of 4, according to the census, now is $90,000. As you all know, higher in Northern Virginia, lower in Southside and Southwest Virginia. Just to give you an update on the median prices in Northern Virginia, in 2025, the year-to-date median price is $664,000 for your single-family home. In Hampton, the year-to-date median price is $345,000. In Richmond, $389,975, and in Roanoke, $293,475. I have a few little numbers for you on housing starts. We have observed single-family starts fall as trade tariffs and uncertainty disrupt the housing market. Housing starts measure the number of new residential construction projects that have broken ground. Single-family housing starts decreased by 2.1% from March to April 2024 and decreased even further on a year-over-year basis, falling by 12% compared to April of 2024. This marks the third consecutive monthly decline for single-family housing starts. In the South, which includes Virginia, starts were 7.4% lower compared to this time last year. The Northeast region experienced a 19.8% overall increase in housing starts. Despite the decrease in single-family housing starts, the overall housing starts increased ever so slightly from the March estimates due to a growth in multifamily construction. Overall housing starts increased by 1.5%. On a year-over-year basis, multifamily starts are up 28% compared to April of 2024. However, it's important to note that multifamily projects are planned further in advance, and that means the full impact of tariffs cannot yet be assessed. Overall permits decreased by 4.7% in April from March of this year. Single-family permits decreased by 5.1% in April compared to March, and were down 6.2% compared to April of last year. According to a survey done by the National Association of Home Builders, 60% of builders reported in April that their supplies have already increased in price or are planning to increase the price of materials due to tariffs. Additionally, interest rates remain high and inflation is slowing. So you don't have to digest all that today. This is the first meeting of the work group this interim. This meeting, as our chair let us know, will go for 2 hours. And the agenda will follow as you see the written format, but some of the people on the agenda may be here to answer good questions that you may have, like the Bureau of Insurance, and may not speak to the issues at hand. With that, let's get the agenda started.
Thank you, Director Palin. First up, we have Senator Scott Serval with the Housing Inspector disclaimer of civil liability. Oh, sorry, civil liability.
Good morning. Good to be with you all. Appreciate you all being willing to take this issue up. So basically what the idea I'd like you all to vet is to prohibit home inspectors from being able to limit their liability. That came to my attention. So home inspectors are licensed professionals. However, Virginia law, a lot of people think you can also limit liability. Have you sign them anyway, but they're not valid. However, the Supreme Court of Virginia has held that you are allowed to limit liability for property damage. So, for example, you are somewhere and you sign something restricted. What every home inspector does is in their contract, and they miss obvious. The problem is because under law, doctrine, longstanding English common law buy a house, it's your job to go walk all around the house, ever. And the exception to that is that you can show fraud. So, the only way you can mitigate your risk $500. The only problem is if they make a mistake, you only sue them. You basically can't get the benefit of the insurance that provides, right? Basically, the only thing insurance really covers is if the car accident on the way to the house, then they got a policy. Or maybe if the home inspector like assaults the person while they're doing the inspection. But other than that, it doesn't cover anything relating to the reason they've been hired. Again,
Senator Serval, my apologies for cutting you off. I'm receiving messages that the microphone at the lectern is not on. Okay, there
I don't have a button.
Okay, we're good. People online cannot hear you.
All right, and then to add insult to injury, just so you understand how this I hear myself now. Just so you understand how this process works. Okay, I mean, I carried a bill about this probably about 8 years ago. Learned a whole lot. And basically, if you're a home inspector, you typically get your referrals from realtors, right? Realtor, says, if you want to do this home inspection, I got somebody for you, use my guy or whatever, right? The reality of the home inspector's point of view is, if they actually go in there and they find 10 things wrong, or they find a $20, $30, $40, $50,000 problem, what happens to the home sale? It doesn't happen, right? So if you have a home inspector who does a really thorough job, finds all the problems, the realtor ain't going to call him back again because it's going to ruin his commission. So the home inspectors basically don't really do a very thorough job, because if they do a thorough job, they won't get hired for the next job. And so if they miss something, you get your $400 back. So the whole system is crazy. It's basically, from my point of view, a way to employ a lot of people to do home inspections for $400 a hit, and you don't get the benefit of your of what you're paying for as a consumer in any real way, or the benefit of the insurance that DPOR provides. So from my perspective, home inspectors either should not be able to limit their liability, or they shouldn't be able to limit it to anything less than the insurance that DPOR requires them to carry. What the home inspectors will say is, well, wait a minute, now we're going to get sued by everybody every time there's a problem with the house, and we're going to become this, like, you know, we're going to become the insurer of last resort every time there's a problem with the house, and we're going to get stuck up all the time. You know what? But that's the whole point of hiring them, is to make sure you can find out what all the problems are with this house before you make a big investment and buy it. Because you don't want to go buy a house and find out it has a $50,000 problem right after you bought it. So, you know, it's a problem that's screaming for a fix. And there's another attorney here from Northern Virginia who does a ton of real estate litigation, way more than I do. I barely do any. And he can sort of reaffirm and confirm everything I said, I think, and talk a little bit. He's got a lot more experience talking to people who have these problems, but that's why I think it needs to get fixed. And I was hoping you guys would sort of vet the concept and bless it.
Thank you, Senator Serval. As you noted, there are 3 individuals who are listed here to provide additional testimony. First up, we have John Altmiller.
Good morning, and thank you for letting me speak. My name is John Altmiller. I've been a civil litigator in Virginia for 33 years. Most of that has been focused in the area of real estate, and I have, certainly in the past 15 or 20 years, done a lot of real estate fraud cases or potential cases. The way the law in Virginia works, as Senator Serval said, is we have caveat emptor. Not only do we have caveat emptor, we have a Disclosure Act, Residential Disclosure Act statute, which says the seller's making no representation. The only exception is concealment. It is very hard to prove. And because there's caveat emptor, anyone who goes and buys a house and has done a home inspection, even if it's a bad one, even if it's a surface one, it's essentially going to knock out a claim for anything but the most egregious concealment, because they're going to say, you had your opportunity to look. The home inspections, if folks haven't seen what they are lengthy, and so they create an impression of thoroughness that is in fact really illusory. First of all, as the senator said, there is a limitation of liability. So even if they miss things, they're not going to be liable. Second of all, in virtually every circumstance, certainly up in Northern Virginia, you have a home inspection contingency. Sometimes you don't, but if you do, it's short. It's 5 days, it's 7 days. Just enough time for you to get the guy from your real estate agent, because you're a buyer, you're unsophisticated. So they say, well, we've got a home inspection contingency. What do? I know a guy. The guy comes in his van, he walks through, and sometimes I've seen them do it, they'll go into the van or the truck and they will type some stuff in and print up the report right there, because you have to turn it around really quickly. Most of these reports, they have an illusion of thoroughness that is not really what it is. It'll break down electrical, HVAC, and it'll say things like, gee, you should really have a professional look at that. Yeah, it looks okay. It's designed to say, I've looked at it. I'm not seeing anything really big. The buyer now has this thick report, but it doesn't really say anything. It says maybe there's a few things you might want to check out, but nothing major. Of course, the agent's going to say, there's nothing really wrong. You've had somebody look at it. Look at this thorough report. Then they find a problem. It's very hard to prove concealment. They come to me and they say, I've got this problem. And you say, well, unless you can show real fraud, unless you can show that somebody was really out to hide this, in which case it wouldn't matter, the home inspector shouldn't find it, you really don't have a case. You can turn to the home inspector, but the home inspector, I never even look at those anymore. When I was a younger trial attorney and people would bring me these cases, I'd look at the home inspection report. It's got so many limitations of liability, including the standard is for the amount that you paid. So you limit liability to $400. Can you imagine a real estate agent or an attorney or a settlement agent saying, you're limited to a few $100 if I screw up your settlement, It really, in my view, puts a seller in this impossible situation, or a buyer in an impossible situation. They've got no protection from the law as far as any defect, unless it's hidden, and even then, it's very difficult to get. Recently, the law changed so that the Virginia Consumer Protection Act doesn't apply to people selling their own homes. So most residential sales are not going to fall within that. You're left with common law fraud, which has many defenses. I should know, I defend these things. They're much better cases to have as a defendant than they are to have as a plaintiff. And you're not really assured of getting any money, any attorney's fees. So you might have a $50,000 claim, even if it's good, and oftentimes it isn't. It's prohibitively expensive. On the other hand, if you've got a professional who's supposed to be looking at these things and identifying these things, they should be treated, in my view, and I think, and certainly in the senators, and I think with most people that I practice with, they ought to be treated like any other professional. If you hire a contractor, even if it just says, I'm going to build this, it's implied by law that they are going to do it in a manner that's commensurate with the professional standards. In other words, it should pass within the trade as being something that's acceptable. It's the same thing if you're a doctor or a lawyer or even a plumber. So but there's no way to enforce that if you don't have some ability to get some relief. And these are essentially contracts of adhesion, because why would any home inspector have a removal of the limitation of liability? It's not going to make them any more attractive. The real estate agents are bringing in folks that they know. And if nobody's going to not limit their liability, why would I do that? Why would I expose myself? There's no reason to do it. We've got liability insurance. I presume those rates are quite low. I don't know. But if you can't make a claim against somebody, I think getting in the business of insuring these guys is probably a pretty good deal, because nobody's getting paid on that. I don't know if anyone has any questions. I think that's the sort of the essential policy issue that we're dealing with.
Ms. Palin.
Madam Chair, just if I'd ask for you to define two terms, because not everybody here is an attorney. If you could talk about adhesion contracts, maybe that they're the same as a ticket or something along those lines. And also if you'd define again caveat emptor for people who are
So
unfamiliar.
let me start with caveat emptor. Caveat emptor is the burden is on the buyer to do an inspection. It's actually expressed as a duty, but what it practically means is when I sell you a house, again, unless I'm engaging in active fraud, there is no duty for me to disclose anything. I could know something is wrong with the house. You're the one. You got to kick the tires. You got to give the test drive. You got to look under the hood. You've got to satisfy yourself. I have no duty. I can't tell you how surprised buyers are when they call me and I tell them, and they say, well, they knew about this. And I say, they can. In fact, there's a line of cases in Virginia, and this is incredible. I'm going to say this and you won't believe it, that sellers are actually allowed to lie about certain things. And there is no liability as long as it's theoretically within the ability of equally within the purchaser to know that it's a lie. In other words, the law literally says you can't trust a seller. Again, unless I'm engaging in concealment or really making it impossible for you to find out. But if that's the case, then you wouldn't find out and the home inspector wouldn't find out. But that's caveat emptor. And that's been the law practically since people were getting off the boat in Jamestown. It's Old English common law, and it's still the law in Virginia. Contract of adhesion really means you don't have the ability to negotiate the terms of a contract. And in this case, number one, you're getting a home inspector that's referred by the real estate agent. You're not out there shopping. And even if you were, everyone's got the same contract. And if they've got the same contract, there's no way for you to negotiate that. So either take the limitation of liability or don't get a home inspection. That's basically what you're looking at. I don't know if there are any other questions.
Yes, Madam Chair.
Delegate McClure.
Yes, thank you, and I appreciate the presentation. So, Madam Chair, I just want to ask, how do other states manage failed inspections, and is this a unique challenge to Virginia?
I haven't really looked at the law in other jurisdictions. As I say, caveat emptor is the common law. I do know that in other jurisdictions, they tend to, the ones that I've seen, have a more robust, at least slightly more robust consumer protection laws. How they apply to these transactions sort of depends. And it is, I haven't seen what the law is in the other jurisdictions, but it would be hard for me to imagine that they would be any more onerous on a seller. I mean, the irony is, I just defended a fraud case in which I used the home inspection as a defense. I said, look, you did a home inspection. And of course, the home inspection is, it shows somebody looked at it. It's not even really the home inspection. It's that you had the opportunity. So I've seen or heard that other jurisdictions have, say in California, there may be a protection, or they're, in some other jurisdictions, but I'm not sure. I couldn't imagine a more onerous version, perhaps is a better way for me to put it.
Thank you, Delegate McClure, for the question. I'm going to direct Housing Commission staff to look into that matter and report back in the future as we continue to look into this matter. We have a few other questions in the queue. First up, we have Ms. Corman.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just wanted to clarify what exactly the issue is that Senator Saravel's bill would be focusing on, because I feel like we got a bunch of issues that kind of got meshed together there. I do represent the Virginia Realtors and disagree with some things that were said. I was also a practicing realtor, so I know that the way that we educate our members is you never give a buyer one name of a home inspector, ever. You always give multiple names. You always let them pick the home inspection, and you want that home inspection to be as thorough as possible, because guess who they're coming after if there's a problem? They're coming after the agent. Why? Because the home inspector, you can't go after them. They're only liable for the cost of the inspection. So this is not something that we're necessarily opposed to. I don't want to come off that way, but I just want to clarify that the issue isn't who's picking the home inspector. It sounds like the issue isn't, and maybe I'm wrong about this, the quality of the home inspection, because I think that's a whole other set of facts and set of issues. There's a lot of conflict of interest that they took into account at DPOR when determining how an inspection had to be done by a home inspector. You don't want a home inspector going in there and saying, I found 15 things wrong, but guess what? I can fix them for you for $1,000. They do need to stay within their lane and say, yes, there looks to be a structural issue. You should get further evaluation of this. And the realtors want, again, that inspection to be as thorough as possible. I think the issue, if I understand correctly, that Senator Saravel is really focusing on is everybody in this transaction can be gone after if there's a problem, except for the home inspector. The home inspector can only be gone after for the cost of the inspection, whether it's $400, $500, whatever they are these days. And so I just want to clarify, is that the issue that we're focusing on here, how much they can be liable for?
And let me say, as someone who routinely represents brokers and agents and have for years in liability cases, that exactly what you said is true. In a way, the agents are stuck with this same contract of adhesion, and they're the ones that are gone after, because they're viewed as the guarantors of the transaction, when I think in most cases they shouldn't be. You can give a couple of names for a home inspector, but effectively, and I'm not as cynical about it as some other people are, but when you give a couple of names, you're stuck still with basically the same version of the contract because they're all limiting liability.
Thank you. We have a few more questions in the queue. Next up, we have Ms. Mara.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And thank you for your presentation. I'm a little bit unclear on what exactly the remedy is that you and Senator Saravel are suggesting. Are you looking, I understand that you've got, you want to remove the cap on liability, but are you then talking about also going from a fraud claim to a negligence claim, so that if you can show the inspector is negligent, that would give rise to the liability?
Well, the bill I carried last time was Senate Bill 627 in 2018. It just basically said you can't limit liability, but the remedy, in theory, it would at least be a breach of contract remedy. There could be a negligence remedy in there too, but the negligence the negligence contract issues can get kind of messy when you have a contract. But the point is just to not have a liability limitation. You can either cap it at whatever the DPOR requires the insurance to be, or have no cap. I mean, the odds of a home inspector missing something of more than $1 million is pretty low. I can't imagine like $1 million problem being missed for a house, but I guess in theory it's possible. But that's I think the solution.
Next, we have Ms. Dobbs.
Thank you, Chairwoman. In these liability cases, have you seen any implications, particularly for homeowner clients and their ability to obtain or maintain homeowners insurance?
I don't really think it becomes an insurance issue. I mean, it can in sort of a cascading way. If you buy a property that has an issue, a lot of the problems that you'll see in these cases are water problems. And anyone who's had that kind of situation recognizes that it can sort of cascade. You have the water problem, and then what do you do? Is it a casualty? It may not be. It may have just been a defect that's not covered. And then if you try and make the claim, it can affect your ability to get insurance or what your rates are moving forward. So again, as somebody, I defend these and I occasionally am a plaintiff on these as well. It's a really tough situation for these sellers who are just, they really don't know any better. And the professionals around them are trying to help, but it's a system that just is not designed to do that.
Okay, we have Mr. Bradshaw who has a question.
Yeah, I guess I know enough about this to be dangerous, but so Senator Survels, we don't have a language to look at. We have a concept, but you don't have a bill language for us to look at. If you're looking for the...
You can go back and look at my old bill that from 2018 if you want. It's pretty simple. It's just, home inspectors can't limit their liability or can't limit their liability any more than the amount of insurance DPOR requires them to carry. But, I mean, the bill I carried in 627 is about, 30 words long.
Has DPOR ever had the issue brought to them for...
Yes.
And
they looked into it, and the home inspector said, we don't see a problem.
Okay. Shock of shock.
Right.
I know we have two other speakers, but do we have, and there's usually time at the end of the meeting for the public to have comments, but do we have anyone from the home inspection industry here to talk? I don't know.
We're here to listen. We're here to listen. Because we hear some things that's totally off the rails.
All right.
Well, I'd just like to remind everyone in attendance that today we are beginning the conversation around this concept. This is not the only opportunity for individuals to share their respective perspectives. As we've outlined, we have Senator Serval here, we have two additional speakers, and we also have someone here from the SEC who has offered to provide comment only when requested. So I'd like for everyone to keep their comments addressed to me, and we will continue to do so moving forward.
I got one more thing on your agenda, and I have to run the CEUR at 11 o'clock.
Yes. So we have one more individual in the queue who has a question, and I'm going to refer to Ms. Corman, and then after that, we will bring forward Joseph Hudgens to provide comment on this matter as well.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I was just curious if any of the other inspectors that participate in a real estate transaction, like a termite or well or septic, are any of them capped on liability the way that home inspectors are?
Surprisingly, I do not know the answer to that question. I've never seen it.
I've never seen the contract.
I've just never seen it. I've never seen it be an issue where it was missed. I don't know. I don't know if that's a comment on how good that profession is, but I haven't seen it. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Corman, and I would also like to thank Mr. Altmiller for his comments. Next up, we have Joseph Hudgens with the Independent Insurance Agents of Virginia.
Good morning. I am Joe Hudgens, and I'm with the Independent Insurance Agents of Virginia.
I need to be very careful what I say because my boss is sitting up there, Robert Bradshaw. So if I say something really stupid, Bob, please don't hold that against me. So what I'm here for, I'm not here to take a position one way or another on the concept, but Ms. Palin asked us to kind of do a dive and find out what insurance products are available to cover the liability. And one thing I want to say before we start, the D4 reg uses the term general liability. General liability is for BI and PD. General liability does not cover professional liability. So what we're talking about here is two different products. General liability is if the inspector shows up, does some damage, drops a hammer on somebody's head, that's general liability. If they miss something, that's professional liability, and that's not treated in the D4 regulation. So anyway, but my purpose was to kind of do a deep dive and see what kind of insurance products are available around the country. And what I found is there are a plethora of home inspector products. One's called Inspect Pro, and they all cover both the general liability, and you can get the professional liability added to it. And they're all different. Every insurance company has a different appetite for what they want to insure. Some will specialize in radon. Some specialize if you use drone to look at roofs. They cover that aspect of it. So the devil is in the details. So then I decided, well, maybe I better take a look to see what various states do regarding professional liability. And I have this. Let me see. So I need to change. Give me 1 second here. Okay. There are 18 states that require professional liability. There's one state that requires professional liability and does not allow limiting your liability, and that's Massachusetts. Massachusetts requires a $250,000 limit, and a home inspector cannot limit their liability. There are 11 states that require GL only. Virginia would be one of those. And there's 20 states that don't require anything. The two states that, well, there's actually 4 states that don't allow a home inspector to restrict their liability: California and Alaska. Interestingly, California requires professional liability but doesn't require general liability. Wisconsin limits the ability to exclude your liability, but you're held to a state standard of practice, whatever that might be. And then Massachusetts doesn't allow it, but they don't allow it through the Board of Registration of Home Inspectors. So it's all over. But I've talked to insurance people, I've called agents, I've called brokers. They say, well, we sell the product. It's readily available across the country. We insure professional liability, and I would assume restricting liability, maybe that varies from state to state, I don't know, but the impression I got, there's product out there, it's available. If you expand exposure and don't allow a limitation of liability, logically that might increase premium, but I don't know that would be a lot. I mean, that would have to play itself out over a 3 to 5 year period. So that's, there's insurance out there. So any questions, anybody? None?
Well, Mr. Hutchins, I think that we sincerely appreciate you coming before us and providing that landscape. There are no questions in the queue at this moment, so we think that you've been able to provide a necessary foundation for us to continue this conversation in the future. Being mindful of time, I appreciate you and all others who have shared their insight. We also look forward to engaging with others who have not presented today on this particular issue, and as I noted, this is the beginning of the conversation and not the end. That being said, we're going to move on to agenda item number 4, mandatory disclosure on home sales regarding whether a property is subject to the Chesapeake Bay Preservation Act. Senator Serval, please take the podium once again.
Thanks. I might have to leave if this one doesn't take it takes more than about 10 minutes, but this is a problem I've seen both in my legal practice, and I have a lot of constituents that have been running into issues about this. So under the Chesapeake Bay Act, localities have to designate resource protection areas, which are basically like areas near running water, or running water, I guess, not just navigable water, where you have severely restricted development rights. You can't build things, you can't do land disturbing activities, et cetera. And the idea is to preserve land around streams so that the water can be filtered out before it gets into the stream and into the Chesapeake Bay, et cetera. And every locality has designated these RPAs, resource protection areas, RPAs, on maps. I represent a ton of people who live on the Potomac River, waterfront houses, and then people that live on the estuaries that go into the Potomac, and then, of course, all of us have people who live on streams. Not everybody's on the Chesapeake Bay watershed, the General Assembly, but a lot of us are. The problems that we've had in my district are a lot of contractors will come in and tell people they can do things in an RPA that they can't. Specifically, we've had a lot of problems with people replacing their bulkheads on the riverfront. So, somebody will buy a usually pretty expensive house if you're waterfront, and they'll have this wall that's falling down. They want to replace it. And we passed the living shoreline law a couple of years ago that says you can replace what you got, but if you're going to build something new, you got to build a living shoreline. And we've had contractors come in and just tell people they can do whatever they feel like. And then the homeowner ends up getting cited and violated and having to pay a lot of fines. And I got one constituent who's stuck in like a 2-year wormhole over this. But I've had other situations I've seen. I had a woman who came to me who somebody dumped 500 dump truck loads of dirt on top of an RPA in her backyard. And she ended up having to spend about $400,000 to get the dirt removed. But she didn't know exactly that. She didn't really understand the restrictions, or that she couldn't do this. The contractor didn't care. And the way the liability works in the Chesapeake Bay Act, you can't really sue the contractor, or the contractor can't. Well, you can sue the contractor, but the contractor can't be held liable by the county for fines and violations. So they don't really care. And so the idea was, we heard about this in the Water Commission last year. It came up with some solutions. But one of the things that needs to be solved is getting homeowners better information about that their home is in an RPA and what they can and can't do. And the original idea that I was asking you all to consider was requiring mandatory disclosure in a home sale agreement, so that when you go to buy the house, at the front end, you're buying a home that has part of its property severely restricted in terms of what you can do in your backyard or maybe your front yard. But in conversations with both the realtors and the home builders, we've come up with some alternative ideas which I think accomplish the same thing without getting in the middle of the contract, such as putting some kind of a warning on everybody's real estate tax bill they get every year to make it clear to them that you are in an RPA and you need to think about this before you go digging up your yard. So I think Andrew Clark with the Home Builders has a little presentation he has about it. But the idea would be require localities to put a prominent notice on your real estate tax assessment if you're in an RPA that you are in an RPA and there's consequences for violating the Chesapeake Bay Act, so that we have fewer of these violations occurring, which can be very expensive for a homeowner if they don't follow the law.
Thank you, Senator. With respect to time and recognizing that you may have to depart before we finish this discussion, I just would like to note that we will probably focus on opposition or concerns to this, as it appears that this has been an effort to establish peace in the Valley. So if that comes up, we will be sure to share that with you. With that being said, I'm going to turn it over to Andrew Clark from the Home Builders Association of Virginia to present his findings and the proposed solution.
Should I go to the podium, or? Oh, I'm getting
Yes, please.
Madam Chair, Andrew Clark with the Home Builders Association of Virginia. Senator Sorovel covered the vast majority of what I was going to cover, unless you really want to get into what makes up an RPA and why they're important. Senator Servell brought this to our attention last year, and as we talked to jurisdictions up and down the coast, you hear a lot about some of the challenges they have. They're not the Coast Guard. They can't go up and down the coast and find people doing bad stuff. They've got staff limitations, staff resources are thin, and when they go and get citizen complaints, they've got to go out and investigate those. They've got to track down those contractors, none of which are our members, side note. And most of the time, they're small 1-2-person shops that are just gone. You can't find them. And so instead of trying to, try to hammer the contractors or, increase, I guess, CE requirements or some kind of educational requirements, trying to inform homeowners that when somebody comes to your door, somebody sells you something like, hey, I'm going to restore your shoreline, you're going to be compliant with all state, local, and sometimes federal law, that they know better than to just say, yeah, sure, go ahead and do it. And so we try to come up with an idea of what is that one document that a locality is sending out to a homeowner that they get every year that they're going to look at, right? Your real estate tax. And so trying to have that as a disclosure where you're just continually having that communication saying a portion of your property is subject to an RPA, restricted, so on and so forth. The language can get refined, but that's the general concept, just trying to make sure people aren't, inadvertently stepping into what can amount to $5,000 a day fines. So, yeah. Oh, yeah. So I skip everything till the very end. There's a couple options. I mean, we had looked at initially the assessment, real estate tax assessment.
Mr. Clark, I know you provided a presentation, so do you want to notify which slide we're skipping to, just so that
I'm sorry.
people who are following along
9 and
have
10.
a chance to do so?
Oh, that would have been good to know. So we had two options. I believe the third option, which I'll kind of briefly cover. First one being just including that notice, whatever that language is, in the real estate tax bill that goes out every year. There's some question of whether folks who pay their real estate tax out of escrow, whether that notice actually gets sent to them physically. Yeah, and we're pretty certain it does. The assessment was the other option, but localities there's about 900 different ways they assess. Some do it every year, some don't send the notices if it doesn't change. And so really, option two is kind of off the table. The third being just a general notice from the locality. I don't think that carries as much weight because we all get mail all the time and it's just like another document. But when you're getting your real estate tax bill and know what you're going to have to pay, you're going to pay a lot of attention to that. So, I think the first option is kind of a great step forward in kind of getting some of these bad actors out of the space, so to speak. Happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. It's already been noted that option two with the assessment notice disclosure gives some heartburn, but that being said, I do want to give VML the chance to speak. Today we are joined by Josette Bulova. So Mr. Clark, if you don't mind letting her take the podium, I'd greatly appreciate it.
Thank you. Like you said, Josette Bulova with the Virginia Municipal League. We don't have an official position on this yet, but we are gathering as much information as possible to vet with our members. We have a few policy committee meetings coming up where we'll discuss this. But like Andrew said, just because there's so many different assessment types and information like that out there, we want to come up with the best. So thank you.
Thank you. Senator Servell, given that you're still here, do you have any additional comment to provide?
No, I mean, Andrew laid it out, and if you look at the materials in your package, it kind of lays out what an RPA is and how it works. But I just think it's important that people get more information because people are violating the law all the time unknowingly. They don't realize it, and then a neighbor will call them in, and then you got a big headache on your hands. And I just think getting more information to people is a good way to save everybody a lot of time and money and make sure our laws are followed. It's a very obscure law, and a lot of people, and by the way, these people buy their homes because they want to be next to the river, next to the creek, next to the woods, so they should have some sensitivity to this, but some people see the woods and want to cut them all down, and you can't do that under the Chesapeake Bay Act. So, and they don't want to have a living shoreline, but you have to. So, I mean, they need to be on notice of the law.
Thank you so much. For transparency purposes, for those that are following along online or here in the room, the entire presentation which Mr. Clark presented. Sorry, my microphone's not on. I'm so used to telling everyone else. For those who are following along online or are here in the room and do not have the presentation which Mr. Clark referenced, it is posted to the Virginia Housing Commission website, and you are able to review it there. With that being said, I have a few individuals in the queue who have questions and comments. So first up, we have Ms. Johnson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm just kind of curious, and I don't know if this question is for Andrew or the senator, but I'm trying to understand or reconcile the role of the permitting process to kind of mitigate this issue. Is it just that, some of these violations are occurring and some of these contractors aren't securing permits, the local government isn't aware? If you can kind of describe where the breakdown is occurring.
Sometimes people don't realize they need a permit. So, for example, it gets kind of complicated, but the localities under the Chesapeake Bay Act are authorized to establish a wetlands board if they want. The wetlands board has jurisdiction over any kind of changes you want to make to your riverfront. And a lot of people don't realize they need to go through the wetlands board before they do things because they don't know about the law. They just think, I already got this thing out here, I can just replace it. Contractor will tell them, no, you don't need any permits. This is something we can just do. And if they knew there was some severe restrictions, it would probably cause people to ask more questions and be more careful about just proceeding. And then there's other kinds of improvements. Like, for example, I was telling you about the woman who dumped all the dirt. If you're going to dump a certain amount of dirt, you have to get a site plan. But if you're going to disturb under at least under the Fairfax County ordinance, I think it's 1,200 square feet or 2,500 square feet or more land disturbance or something like that. But if you're doing less than that, you don't have to get you don't have to get that permit, but you still can't do it in an RPA even though you don't need to get a permit, right? So you can still get violated. So it kind of depends on what the issue is or what you're trying to do. That's just some of the examples. There's many others though.
Thank you, Senator. Seeing no further questions, we do have a comment from Mr. Clark.
Madam Chair, I was just going to add, and I'm sorry, I apologize, I kind of breezed through that presentation. On pages 3 and 4, we did pages 2, I guess. I think a lot of people think of resource protection areas of these really obscure, like submerged areas of land. You'd be surprised at how many houses sit in the RPA. So somebody who just simply wants to place a shed in their backyard, that was not going well, wants to place a shed in their backyard. If you change your landscaping, if you have managed landscaping in your backyard and you just plant a flower bed or some other kind of accessory dwelling unit or anything, all of a sudden you're in violation. And it has obviously environmental impacts when you kind of disturb these lands that are identified by the locality as having an environmental and ecological benefit to remain undeveloped. So I did just want to point that out, that they're not just these random creeks in the middle of the woods. They're really kind of all throughout everybody's community.
Yep. I gotta go.
Senator?
I gotta go, so.
Sounds good.
Appreciate
I
it.
see no further comments or questions in the queue. We thank you
Okay.
for bringing both items before us.
Thanks
Have
for
a
your
good
time
day.
today.
Next up, we have agenda item number 5, House Bill 1709. This piece of legislation was carried during the 2025 regular legislative session by Delegate Gardner. Delegate Gardner, would you like to take to the podium? So Delegate Gardner, I know that you're planning to bring forward this concept, share a little bit about the inspiration behind the piece of legislation, and then you have different individuals who wish to speak in support of the piece of legislation as it was initially drafted, and then those who wish to raise a few concerns and opportunities for refinement as well. So I just want to be mindful of time again, just to make sure that we have the chance for discussion. Unlike the previous two agenda items, our goal with your piece of legislation is to come up with a solution today and to see what we can do to try to navigate that process together.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and committee members. House Bill 1709 kind of came to me from constituents in my area. I'm the 76th district, and we're kind of a graying community, so a lot of the legislation that's kind of been brought forth is kind of related to that. The issue that was at hand was in several multi-dwelling units in that area that had a lot of senior residents and people who were long-term residents who had been in these units for a long time. When they came up for renewal, the landlord had actually, or the unit had actually entered into bulk service agreements with cable companies. And when they went to renew their lease, and like I said, some of those people had lived there for 20 plus years, and went to renew their lease. And these fees were now included in their lease renewal because of the bulk agreements. And as a result, some of the tenants who were on fixed incomes had to seek other housing opportunities because they just could not afford the fees. In this particular case, the gentleman who brought it as the spokesman for the tenants who lived there and some of the people who had to move said that their fees were in excess of $80 a month. As a fee, and that some people just could not afford to do that. So as a result, I brought about the legislation of 1709, and I guess the sticking point for this was that we wanted to give tenants an opportunity to opt out. And after bringing this forward, we had other advocates who reached out to us who spoke about not only tenants who couldn't afford it, but tenants who also had other agreements with cable companies where they got reduced fees for their cable or broadband services, but they still had to pay this fee. So in an effort to try to find some peace in the valley, we had several meetings, but I guess the sticking point and some of the pieces of the legislation was pretty good, but the sticking point was the opt-out clause. And I just didn't see any resolution for helping those people. Broadband, I agree, is essential. The purpose of this bill was certainly not to detract from that in any way, but it was to make sure that our tenants had transparency and they had choice, and that they were not required to have to leave their long-term homes and places that they have lived because of new fees added to their lease.
Thank you, Delegate.
I could go on, but I'll be brief.
Well, thank you, Delegate Gardner. If it's okay with you, I'm going to go ahead and start bringing up a few of our speakers, and then as questions come about or comments come up for members of the work group, I will just ask them to sign up in the queue, and then we'll, of course, afford them the opportunity to ask their comments or to ask their questions or make their respective comments. First up, we have the Virginia Poverty Law Center.
Good morning, Madam Chair, members of the committee. Daniel Rezai with Virginia Poverty Law Center. Before coming to VPLC, I was an eviction defense attorney practicing in 11 different localities here in the Commonwealth of Virginia, and oftentimes people end up in eviction court, and it's related to costs of paying their rent. When we look at HB 1709, and its intention is to offer some financial stability to tenants who have to make real decisions month to month about where their money goes. Bulk billing removes competition between providers and does not equal savings for the consumer. I would like to use my own example. My wife and I have a home in Midlothian, and we were able to buy home internet from T-Mobile, our cell phone provider, for $40 a month. which was $100 less than any other competitor of traditional broadband delivery in our area. Having this opportunity would offer low-income tenants or tenants who have to budget every month for where their money goes a true steep discount by just using their cell phone provider for their home internet needs. Additionally, bulk billing requires internet at a cost that some tenants don't want and that some tenants don't need. By having a bulk billing agreement with an internet service provider, the landlord is making the decision for the tenant. If the tenant chooses to not have internet in their home for whatever reason, that's their right to choose. It also presupposes that the tenant needs the internet that the landlord is providing, and maybe they don't. Maybe they don't stream like all of us. They don't have Netflix. They just need to send occasional email to somebody in their family. Bulk billing denies low-income tenants access to some subsidies, which the delegate already mentioned, and someone else speaking today has a lot more knowledge on that than I do. And I think the other thing is it doesn't account for the changing of our economic outlook here in America. With so many people moving to at-home work, upload and download speeds are essential for being able to obtain employment. My own wife has had a couple job interviews where upload and download speeds are required to get a job. So imagine, if you will, someone who's looking for employment, has had a hard time finding employment, but is stuck in a bulk billing agreement where every job offer they get, they can't take the job because their internet doesn't meet the speeds necessary. That's something essential because you're telling someone now, if you're trying to make ends meet, you're trying to budget and have control over your own life, that because of the internet your landlord requires you to have, rather than gives you a choice to have, you can't get a job, which means you can't pay for groceries, can't pay to take your kids places, can't pay for essential things that you need in life. And yes, for low-income tenants, that 90, 100, and depending on where you live in Virginia, I'm sure it's more, can make a difference on whether you stay housed, stay employed, and have a life that you want to live. It's not up to the landlords to choose something like broadband for the tenants. It's the tenant's choice to control their financial stability. Happy to answer any questions, and thank you for your time.
Well, thank you so much for your presentation. Well, I give everyone else a chance to enter into the queue. You referenced bulk billing a few times, and I just want you to define it like in your own terms so that we're all operating with the same information.
So my understanding about these bulk billing agreements is if you think of an apartment complex that when you move in, you see on the wall there's the ability for you to put a cord in the wall. The landlord has contracted with an internet service provider to run internet into each one of those ports in every single apartment, and they sign the agreement with how much that internet is going to cost. Then they pass those costs onto you as a tenant as part of your monthly fees. And it may show up either as I understand, an agreement for the internet you are required to have, or they may just tack it into your rent and not tell you that's what it's for. It depends on the landlord. But that's my understanding of how bulk billing agreements work.
Thank you. In the queue, we have Ms. Mara.
Thank you, Madam Chair. You talked about a situation where somebody might need a higher speed than what the landlord is providing. And so am I correct in understanding that in those circumstances, at least for the lower income tenants that we work with, they can't just go out and pay for that other service because of financial means? That's correct?
Because they would be paying for the internet their landlord is requiring them to buy, it would be difficult to pay for a second internet service that meets upload and download speeds that they would need for their work and life. So yes, essentially they'd be priced out of their own job.
Yeah. Follow-up question, Madam Chair. For others who aren't in that financial circumstance, do you know whether it's even possible for them to opt out of the internet that is provided by the landlord so they can access the higher speed internet and the job opportunities?
As someone who has lived in an apartment where there was a bulk billing arrangement, I was not given an option on to what I could or couldn't do. The internet I got is the internet I got.
Thank you.
Thank you. We have another question in the queue. Ms. Corman?
Thank you, Madam Chair. You talked about renewals, and I think the previous speaker spoke about renewals as well. So someone who's lived there for many years and then the terms are changing, so additional fees are being added on. Do you have the same concerns about people that are just shopping for an apartment and looking and seeing the different opportunities? They can either go with a unit where the landlord has chosen to offer them a full suite of services. Maybe they're paying for hot water and laundry and broadband versus going with a unit where no services are offered. Is this mainly a concern for people that have been living there all along and on renewal or finding out they have a new fee?
My understanding is that there's no, if the landlord enters into this bulk agreement, it's all or nothing. It's all the units or none of the units. That's the, I guess that's the carrot to get them to enter into those agreements. I'm sure the broadband people will answer that better than me, but my understanding is there are no such things as this unit doesn't have it, everybody has it, it's all or nothing.
Follow-up question, Madam Chair? No, I do understand that. I guess my question was, do you guys have concern for people that are just out there shopping for a rental unit and the landlord is offering them this suite of services, whatever they've chosen to offer to make their unit more marketable, and maybe they've offered internet as part of that? Are you concerned with that tenant's ability to decide whether they want to rent that unit or not? Is this mostly a concern for somebody who basically didn't know the fee was coming?
The bill encompasses everybody. It's not just on renewal.
Delegate, I think Ms. Corman, don't let me put words in your mouth. I think what we're trying to get at is like, what is the scope of, while the bill language may address everyone, I think the question is like, who is your intended audience with the legislation as you frame it?
My intended audience is anyone who wants to opt out of having this service for whatever the reason.
Thank you.
And I would answer Ms. Corman's question is, I have a concern for all tenants in Virginia when it comes to their ability to negotiate their rental agreements with what they're paying for or what they do and don't want. So as it relates to the entire suite of opportunities that a landlord would say on their promotions for their unit that they offer, I have significant concerns about all of them with the add up of costs over time versus what they're told your rent is going to be. But that's having worked as an eviction defense attorney across large swaths of the state versus being in a landlord operation of any kind.
Thank you. Ms. Corman?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just one follow-up. We did pass a law this past General Assembly session, it'll be effective July 1st, where all of those fees that are charged in addition to rent have to be itemized on the lease. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Madam Chair?
Delegate McClure?
Kind of follow-up question to that. If a tenant is shopping around for a place to rent, and this agreement isn't in place, while they're living there, could a landlord enter into the bulk agreement and impose the fee onto the tenant?
You're asking the VRLTA related question. I mean, a landlord could form that agreement with the provider during the middle portion of a tenant's term, but they would need to wait until the renewal to become effective in order to send proper notice to the tenant. Upon renewal, you must take on this internet service that I will now be providing. But I don't know that that would stop a landlord from trying, as we have seen landlords across the state have attempted to do things like that. Not specifically related to the internet providings, just changes being made midterm do happen in Virginia.
So, Madam Chair, just quick follow-up.
Delegate McClure?
So I guess what you're telling me is if you're living there, you just moved there, say, for example, in my situation, I just had a baby girl, you're telling me that I have to uproot my entire family just to switch internet providers?
For low income and for a lot of tenants, yes, that could happen at the end of your lease term, yes.
Thank you.
Next in the queue, we have Ms. Mara.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just have a follow-up question to the conversation with Ms. Corman earlier. You mentioned that new law that requires disclosure of all of the different fees. Would a tenant generally get that disclosure before they decide which unit, which apartment they're going to rent while they're shopping for it? Or do they get that once they say, this is what I want, maybe even pay the security deposit, and then get the disclosure?
It is my understanding that that disclosure comes at time of lease signing, not while they're shopping for their home.
Thank you.
Next in the queue, we have Mr. Clark.
I think I heard this correctly. You're seeing that bulk, what are they called? Bulk billing. I knew it was a simple word. It went out of my head. Drives the price of the internet up?
No, I'm saying that relative to options that are available to you, they may be more expensive than other internet service providers offer.
And are these, Madam Chair, these older buildings? I mean, I love options, I love choice, but like to the multifamily developers that I've spoken to, their bulk packages get them down to like $15 on some of these services. Like they are like lowest of the low. So I'm trying to figure out if this is like a, older building stock or what's going on that.
If you'd like to, please.
That. And that may not even be an answerable question. I was just like, when I called my guys, said, what are you guys, like, it's like $15.
Delegate Gardner.
I would certainly defer to the broadband people, but that might be the per unit for the whole total, but that's not necessarily what's passed on to the tenant.
Okay, that makes sense.
And just additionally, I'd love to know the units that it's $15 a month, but the people that were reported to the delegate when this bill came to her attention last year was $80 or $90 a month.
Yeah,
and I can't remember what it was on my lease term when I had my lease here in Richmond, but I don't think it's just tied to old buildings. I think it's a choice that landlords make to add that bulk billing arrangement to their building.
Mr. Clark, you're welcome to provide comment.
That's kind of what I was getting at. Is it seems like it's more on the landlord, because I heard completely different kind of accounts of how things gone. Anyway, I was just curious. Thank you. You answered the question.
Well, thank you for your comments.
Yes, of course. Thank you all.
Next up, we have Abby Phillips from the Legal Aid Justice Center. Oh, I'm sorry, she is not here in attendance. So we'll go on to Michael Pruitt from Housing Opportunity Made Equal.
Good morning, Madam Chair. My name is Mike Pruitt. I'm with Housing Opportunities Made Equal, which is a Virginia-wide nonprofit that focuses on housing discrimination issues. I want to start actually by answering a previous question, which was how will you define bulk billing? And I think it's helpful to kind of unravel this as two separate contracts between two separate groups of parties to understand how we're thinking about this. There's first the relationship at contract between the landlord and the service provider, and then there's separately dozens, hundreds of individual contracts that landlord has with their individual tenants. We are primarily speaking today at home about that second element, the nature of the relationship with the tenants. And I should note that this bill tackles both of these elements. When we look at the relationship with the tenants, to get to Mr. Clark's previous point, what we see is frequently, and we are investigating several of these cases throughout the Commonwealth currently, and there has been litigation on this previously. We see instances where it's very clear that the landlord is deliberately trying to capture surplus value created through entering into these bulk billing agreements. The very simple case would be if I own 100 units, I contract to, we're going to do very simple math, ladies and gentlemen. I have 100 units. I contract to have $100 per month to service all my units. And then each of my 100 tenants, I charge them $2 a month. Suddenly, I'm making an extra $100 a month from my tenants that they are not having that is realized toward their service, right? It is cost that is not going toward service, that is not going toward their internet service, that is being captured by the landlord. This is one of the key problems that this does. This is an attempt by landlords to very directly drive up rents, but hide it, right? It still has to be disclosed. It'll show up as a media service fee, but it is not something that they know at time of lease signing, or rather, it is not something they know at the time of lease shopping, something that they encounter at the time of lease signing. It does emerge as these landlords kind of discover these strategies. It can emerge as an at time of renewal issue. Additionally, I would like to point out we've talked very briefly about this, but I want to dig a little bit more into it, and that's the nature of subsidies. There are a number of subsidies related to broadband that this can interrupt, and I'm going to talk about one specifically, which is Xfinity and Cox. Both respectively offer something called an Internet Essentials package, and they can also offer these at different rates through different partnerships with local nonprofits, most commonly school divisions. This allows low-income individuals to individually sign up at much, much, much lower rates. We're talking $10 a month internet, $15 a month internet, $30 a month internet. It depends on the way it's structured, but very, very inexpensive internet for qualified individuals. This is due to some litigation and antitrust action that has happened against these in the past, but they are required to offer these services. When you require your tenants to enter into a bulk billing agreement for in excess of that, for $80 a month, as we see in the cases that we investigate, what is happening is that those tenants who are qualified for a subsidized internet are not able to use that. We see that as a form of source of funds violation, as in this is a subsidy that these low-income people are receiving, that their landlord is effectively denying them. So we see that as a very acute form of housing discrimination, right? Source of funds discrimination means discriminating against someone based on how they get their money. It's a class-based, often race-coded form of discrimination that this plays directly into. Those are the key kind of points I want to drive at. I would also mention there's always going to be the element of tenant choice that has previously been mentioned, right? If I like to hang out at home. I have everything I want on the internet on my phone. If I need to print something or if I need to download a PDF, I'm going to go to the library. And I save money by not signing up for internet. Or I aspire to be a competitive esports player in the Valorant League. I need 5 gig super blast internet. Both of those people are kind of left out in the cold by bulk billing agreements. That's all I have. But I'd entertain any questions from the board.
Thank you. While there's no one listed in the queue at this moment, I think we're just going to continue to move ahead. So we have a few more individuals who are willing to offer some insight into this matter. First, we have Ray Lamara, president of VCTA, the Broadband Association of Virginia.
Good morning, Madam Chair, members of the committee. There's a lot to unpack with some comments that have been made. I will share initially that for the past 10 years, Virginia General Assembly, governors, our U.S. senators, our U.S. Congress have been working on getting broadband deployed to those unserved and to get broadband adopted by those as well. I do feel I need to speak to some of these points that have been made. When bulk billing occurs in units, those speeds are upgradable. The Internet Essentials were not tied to litigation, and that's very disappointing to hear those comments. Competition occurs at the initial stage when a landlord is working with internet service providers to identify who would be the best provider to come into the building. And there is significant savings to those residents when they are part of a bulk billing agreement. Virginia has led the nation in our policy that we have developed for broadband. This will set us backwards. And in fact, we just held a broadband conference with the Department of Housing and Community Development. And numerous speakers came and spoke of the benefits and need for those to adopt broadband, for telehealth, and for social connectivity. And we saw those rampant throughout the issues with COVID, especially for seniors dealing with telehealth issues where there's oftentimes where there's repeat visits, they have to go to the doctor. These can be done through telehealth and at reduced costs, rather than having seniors get into a car, travel and pays those expenses and sit in a doctor's office and get nothing. Telehealth is where people can benefit from. Dr. Karen Ruban from UVA spoke specifically to this at our last conference. Quite frankly, there needs to be, and we've offered the opportunity for more education around broadband and telehealth, specifically in multi-dwelling units, where people can learn the benefits of broadband. I mean, quite frankly, why is the legislature, why is Congress, why are governors working to do this? Because we understand the importance of broadband. We're opposed to this legislation, but we're willing to work on initiatives, again, that drive adoption and understanding of the benefits. I do have Joe Wisner here, who is with Xfinity Communities, who works specifically in bulk building, who would be glad to answer any specific questions. As Tom, I'm sensitive to the issues of the commission. If you have specific questions for him, he can come up. But other than that, I'd be glad to answer any questions.
Thank you. We have a few individuals who are in the queue, and if it's best to have the question directed at you or someone else, feel free to have them step up to the podium. So first up, we have Ms. Mara.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for your comments. Just one question. You mentioned that these bulk billing arrangements that landlords will enter into with the service provider and then pass on to the tenants allow for an upgrade of speed. Does that upgrade of speed cost the tenant extra money? Do they have to contract for that?
Sure.
Yes, thank you. Good morning. Yes, the concept is called landlord responsible tenant upgradable. And so each tenant, the landlord might contract for, we'll say, 200 megabits of service. And if a tenant has a requirement through their job that they need 1 gigabit, they can call Comcast or whatever provider, and they can, for an additional fee, and that fee is reduced because they are a resident in a bulk community, so maybe an extra $15, and they can get their speed upgraded. And that's an individual option for each one of them.
Thank you.
Next up, we have Ms. Dobbs.
Thank you, Madam Chair. When you have these bulk billing agreements with that contract between the landlord and the service provider, how often do you see residents of that building choosing an alternative service? Are other providers able to do business in that building because there's a separate agreement with one service provider, or is it creating in-building monopolies with one provider?
So it was explained earlier that there are two separate types of contracts, and the contract between the service provider and the landlord is for 100% of all of the residents that are there. The individual tenant that does not create exclusivity of providers. Another provider, if they have service to the building, could provide service, and someone could get service from a different provider at their own cost, but that would be in addition to what the landlord is charging them for their service.
Madam Chair, if I may ask a follow-up question?
Go ahead, Ms. Dobbs.
My understanding under FCC regulations is that internet service providers cannot contract in a way that gives them exclusive access to the building. They have to let other service providers in there. But there's nothing to prohibit a landlord from restricting access to one provider. And even if they do allow access to other provider, what is the actual incentive for a tenant to basically pay for two services, one charged by their landlord that they don't have the option to opt out of, and then go pay for a separate service that actually meets their needs? So they're basically paying double.
I understand that question. So a couple of things that happen with the agreements between the service providers and MDUs. The reason there's agreements to begin with is because it's on private property. They're not, the streets are private, and so you have to get an access agreement from the landlord that says you're going to give us permission to come on your property that you own, service, install, disconnect, maintain, collect revenues, and so forth from these tenants. That's not the case on public streets. So there's first an agreement that's an access agreement, and then there's an addendum on that agreement that's called a bulk addendum that we can go into and say, okay, we're now going for this set amount. And I believe Mr. Clark, he was very close. There's a lot of In technology right now, especially in new construction, people will have 15, 20, 30 devices in their home that are getting on Wi-Fi and connecting. And bulk allows people to have managed Wi-Fi, connected buildings where the service is ubiquitous across the entire property. So someone can go from their unit to the pool, to the common area, to the gym, and not lose connectivity on their device. If there's students in student housing, they can go to their classmates' rooms and still be connected to the internet without having to use different passcodes to get on. But to your question, Ms. Dobbs, the person, typically the rate for the internet is reduced enough, usually almost 50% from what the retail rate would be. And so there's a savings that the person doesn't have to pay another provider. They're going to save the money that they were paying by not having to pay that now because it's now included in their rent. Maybe the rent's going up a certain amount, but they're excusing that cost from having to pay the other provider. Does that make sense? And they can certainly choose to pay another provider if they want, but I don't know why they would.
Ms. Dobbs, do you have a follow-up question?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. I was having a problem with my microphone.
No worries. I just want to be mindful of time. So we have some other people in the queue.
Great, thank you. I'll try to be brief. So I understand that it does create connectivity across the building, but getting back to one of the comments earlier about the subsidies, if a tenant has a subsidy to reduce their rate, have you seen success in other states where you have these bulk billing agreements where the tenant is able to opt out of whatever the landlord is charging them and actually take advantage of subsidies so they're not paying more than what they can actually afford, oftentimes using the same internet service provider, just paying a different amount?
Yeah, so most internet right now, I just saw some numbers on this morning. We're only about 12% of all MDUs have bulk billing agreements in them. Most of them are not affordable housing, so it's not necessarily that applicable. We do have those programs such as Internet Essentials. I believe it's like $15 a month that we do offer aggressively in affordable housing communities. But it's around 10% of all MDUs that have bulk agreements right now.
Mr. Clark?
Terrible at this, but I'm starting to think I don't know how the internet works. So when you negotiate the bulk buildings with like a developer, is that like a set rate based on the number of units?
That is correct.
Like across the board, like guy comes in with 100, somebody down the street comes in with 100, and it's the same rate? No negotiation?
Not necessarily. There's usually within a range. There's an ROI model that's put together depending on what the cost to build is in the term. Typically, these agreements are 5 years long. Sometimes developers will take a 7-year agreement. Sometimes they'll allow a ramp up. So for the example provided where you have people who are in a lease currently, and so sometimes we'll come in and say, okay, we're going to ramp your billing for the course of 12 months to allow for those people who are in current leases to have their leases renewed. But within a 12-month period, you'll be at 100%, paying for 100% of your residents. But the range, there's a ballpark range that it usually doesn't fluctuate by more than like 5%.
All right, so there's some negotiation. And I guess my second question is, so like we'll go with the building of 100 people again, and 3 people say, I don't want it. Who does that impact? Is that impacting you guys? Or is it developers who are like, oh, we can't do it? I mean, that's what I'm missing.
Yeah, it's ultimately going to impact the landlord or the developer because the provider is going to charge them for 100%. Now, when the FCC had talked about this a little while ago, there was talk about opt-out, but the challenge with opt-out is that you then have to almost create dynamic surge pricing in a way that you say, okay, if less than 10% of your people opt out, then this is going to be your price. But if 15% of your people opt out, then we have to raise your rates. We have to raise what we're charging you because we have to get a certain amount of revenue from this property to cover the cost of these access. We're talking about hundreds of thousands of dollars to come in. We'll spend $250,000 in equipment to come in and put access points and equipment into these buildings to provide service.
Madam Chair, one more, and then I promise to be quiet. So if the developer just eats that cost, sorry, I keep saying developer, landlord, whoever, but if the developer just says, look, I had 10 people drop out and like, I'll eat that.
That's correct.
That's perfectly fine. You guys don't have an issue with that. It's just what's coming back to you, right? It's not a infrastructure capacity issue.
It costs the same amount to deliver it to whether those people use it or not. It costs the same amount of money to build to that particular property and design the infrastructure and put it in for the availability. Because what happens if a tenant moves and then a new tenant moves into that unit and they do want internet service? And if we didn't put an access point or connect that unit and have it ready, then we have to come back and make modifications after the point. So when you do it all at once and get everything in, you're actually being very efficient with the cost and the structure of doing so.
Thank you.
Next in the queue, we have Ms. Johnson.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I just wanted to just make sure that I differentiated. I think you'd mentioned just the universe of affordable properties probably aren't as impacted. I think one thing that sometimes gets lost is that we have a whole portfolio of naturally occurring affordable housing. And so even though there aren't the same sort of restrictions imposed on those sorts of properties just per like federal guidelines, you still have a number of folks who are low, moderate income who are living in those properties. So any changes in, what they have to pay month to month can have a pretty significant impact. It's just what we've seen in our portfolio. We kind of get calls from folks pretty consistently about just like rent increases. So I'm just layering this on top of, if there are any substantive changes in these sorts of bulk kind of costs, that there could be some, unintended consequences for properties where folks really are very limited in the income that they can spend on housing expenses. So I just wanted to also ask whether or not there's any opportunity for a developer or owner to enter into agreement that had kind of a tiered system, so not 100%, not a full opt-out, but could they say, well, we want 50% coverage, we want 75% coverage, anticipating that some folks would opt out? Is that even an option?
It is not.
Next in the queue, we have Delegate McClure.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think Ms. Johnson kind of hit on the question that I had. I just feel like we hadn't properly addressed the concerns about those who qualify for subsidy or some sort of program that's outside of the Essentials program. So can you just try again to properly address those concerns about those when it comes to people who qualify for discounted internet or any kind of subsidy program? I know that you just answered the question about not being able to go at 50% or any sort of percentage of the bulk agreement, but my biggest concern are those folks who cannot afford any particular fee. And I don't think that the proper answer is move somewhere else or find another place to live.
Sure. Yeah, I certainly don't want to suggest that as the answer. I believe that we are proponents of adoption. We're proponents of quite honestly, having reliable internet connectivity is something that helps folks for connection to job opportunities, to be connected socially, to be connected and help in a lot of other things. I think that this is something that there's a lot of conversation about, and I think that we'd be interested in continuing the conversation about what those opportunities are. The way it's designed today, it's not designed to put a tiered structure of fees. Oftentimes, we talked about landlord responsible, tenant upgradable. A lot of times we'll come in and say, hey, here's a lower speed. Landlord, you have a lower cost. Maybe your internet service is we're only charging you $20. In a retail world, we would charge $60 for this. But we're charging that landlord $20, and he's going to pass it off. That's $5 more than Internet Essentials, but about 3 times the speed of what Internet Essentials is. Then if that particular resident said, hey, I need more than 200 megabits, I need 500 megabits, or I need 1 gig for whatever reason, then they would call in as a tenant, and those individuals could upgrade completely. So I think the issue, I mean, $80 seems like an awful lot to me. That seems like a lot.
Thank you. So next we have Ms. Mara.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just to make sure I understand, I think what you're saying is right now, these service contracts with landlords are always exclusive contracts. You're going to cover 100% of the units, and the idea is this is it. Take it or leave it, landlord, you have to let us cover 100%, then putting the landlord in the position of figuring out how to deal with tenants who don't want that service, can get service through a different subsidized program, or have found a more affordable service through their phone provider. Am I understanding that correctly?
Yes, the reason for that is so that you can pass through the reduced cost. If they said that only 10% of the people were going to pay the reduced cost, so we would just sell it individually at the retail rate, at the full retail rate. But the benefit is you're getting the large, almost buying cooperative type power for the entire complex to be able to get this greatly reduced price. If we start taking people out of that, then the price is going to start going up.
Thank you. Follow-up question, Madam Chair?
Ms. Mara?
But that decision is made by the landlord. That's who your contract is with.
That is correct.
Okay.
The decision,
Thank you.
The contract is with the landlord.
Thank you.
Mr. Grumbine?
Thank you, Madam Chair. My question is, I guess I'm cognizant of the landlord to provide services to their tenants. And Delegate Gardner, when she started speaking on this issue, acknowledged that internet service is an essential utility today. So as we look at the other essential utilities, you have water, you have electricity, you have trash that the landlord needs to provide. If the tenant said, I'm okay with a water bill, but I don't want a sewer bill, we can all imagine the problem that creates. Or if they're going to take their trash off property, if they I don't want to be charged for trash. So I can see the issue that if we start giving tenants the right to opt in or opt out, that's going to push up the cost for those remaining tenants that stay in that, so that we really haven't achieved anything. Or we could also see password sharing, neighbors getting together and saying, here's my password, I'm not going to pay, you pay. So I just see that to be able to provide an essential service, we need to have a level platform to begin from.
I'm glad you called it an essential service, because it is. It is an essential service. It's not a luxury service for folks anymore. The average home has, an average home of 4 people have 30 devices connected to their internet service. And we'll see that, likewise for a landlord, this is an amenity that he can offer that actually drives people to their property. So from a competitive standpoint, if I'm a landlord and I don't want to have people going down the street to another property because they're offering bulk internet service and I'm not. A lot of people, I think it's over, I believe the statistic I saw is almost 60% of people want to know what the internet capability and speed is when they move into an apartment. That's a question they ask the leasing agent. What's my internet connectivity? What's the speed? What am I getting here?
All right, and the last person we have in the queue is Ms. Dobbs.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Since we're talking about essential services, our internet service providers are regulated monopoly in the way that electricity and water and sewer are in the state.
They are not a public utility.
I actually think that was a fantastic end to this because I'll come back to my point in a second. But Delegate Gardner, would you like to say anything before we close out this discussion?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yes, I would. I want to thank everybody for their opinions. And, my whole goal is to find some resolution to this. I agree that broadband is an essential service for some people, most people in today's society, but so is affordability and the ability to pay for other things that are more critical, like food and a place to stay. Tenants who qualify for free services should never be required to pay twice, and as we've discussed about that, free or reduced services, because some federal programs actually provide free services. They should not have to pay twice for that. And this bill tried to ensure fairness and not interference, but protect tenants who had no options but to move because they couldn't afford these fees for services that some of them may not need or want. So I hope we can find some resolution to this to help everybody. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Gardner. We have one final comment or question in the chat, and that is coming from Ms. Corman, and then we're going to close out this discussion.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and maybe this is a question for staff, but I'm curious, the bill language that was in our folder, is this the bill that we're working from? Because this was not the bill that we ended with in committee last year.
I can answer that question, Madam Chair, if that's okay. So the bills that are referred to the commission introduce the topic to the commission. They are a boilerplate for the topic to go forward to talk about a new topic. They are not the language that will go forward next year if the bill is endorsed by the commission. If that bill was in a good shape to go forward, it probably would have passed the previous year.
So in the case of House Bill 1709, I watched the testimony from this past legislative session. Delegate Gardner presented her bill. There were many questions. We were unable to come to Peace and Valley. While I do not serve on that particular committee, I wanted to make sure that I had a better understanding of why it was sent to the Housing Commission. There was a great deal of discussion around the language for the bill, as well as what exactly the challenge that Delegate Gardner was trying to address with the language. And sadly, it appears that continues to be the big challenge up here. So even some of the questions were straying into consumer protection questions. And of course, we are the Housing Commission, where we're focused on that interaction between landlords and tenants. And as noted by one of the speakers, we saw both components. We had concerns around the landlord and the tenant interaction, as well as concerns around the landlord and the internet service provider. And as a result, it does not appear that we were able to work towards coming up with a legislative solution at this moment. I think that we all walked away with a few more questions and opportunities to try to support tenants in this process. I do not get the sense that we are prepared to work on a legislative fix as a work group at this time. That being said, I think that it goes without saying that everyone on this dais, and quite frankly in this room, and many of those individuals who are watching from home, are very concerned about our tenants. We are all working very diligently as members of the General Assembly to find affordable housing options, but more importantly, just expand housing opportunities while making sure that individuals have the ability to have the resources and essential items in which they need to thrive, both within their home, but also within their respective work environment. And much of that is tied to internet connectivity. And we've also been working very diligently on broadband access and expanding access. That being said, I propose that we do not take any action on this particular piece of legislation. I look forward to working with Delegate Gardner moving forward on trying to come up with a legislative solution. I think that there may need to be an opportunity for us to hone in on what the particular problem is specifically that you are trying to address, just because I think the scale, again, is going to touch upon both landlord and tenant options as well as consumer protection. And if we focus on landlord and tenant, I think that there is a way that the state can get involved when it comes to the conversation around landlord and cable internet connectivity. There is a federal landscape as well to that. So I think that there are many people in this room who would love to assist with that process, but I'm making the recommendation that this be a conversation that we work offline on. And I look forward to seeing the legislation that comes before you. I don't know if anyone else would like to weigh in on anything that I've said. I am open to feedback. Or if anyone has an alternate solution on how we can best move forward, I am all ears. Ms. Dobbs?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think it would be helpful if we were, working from the language from the amended bill that was presented to the committee during legislation, because I think it did two parts. One was to prohibit those bulk billing agreements, and the second was allowing the tenant to opt out. I think we understand that, perhaps we don't want to ban bulk billing agreements, particularly if there's, affordable housing providers are able to pass on free internet to their tenants through other subsidy programs, and it could interfere with that. And if there is cost savings that do get passed on the tenant, that's great. But there's a lack of transparency on, how much of those savings are actually getting passed on to residents, and having a pathway that the tenant is able to opt out of a service, or at least if they have a subsidy, to have that subsidy actually reflected on what they're paying to the landlord. So if you can work from that language, I think we could actually get somewhere. Thank you.
Agreed. That's exactly why I think that this is best served offline, so that we can truly hone in on separating those two challenges. So thank you for reaffirming my thought process. Is there anyone else who would like to assist or weigh in on this matter? Well, seeing none, I'm just going to view that as unanimous agreement. And we look forward to working with you, Delegate Gardner, on this matter. And I thank everyone in attendance for weighing in, and for those who provided testimony, both in support and in opposition, and look forward to continuing this conversation.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Next up, we have agenda item 6, which is focused on fees for rental insurance. Before we invite our first speaker up, I'm actually going to turn it over to Ms. Paulin so that she can offer some insight on how we selected the panelists.
Thank you, people. Our first speaker came to us because he sent me a letter that this was an issue that was affecting his family. But I want to let you all know that we have two other senators who I heard from, constituents of theirs as well. They're just not at this particular meeting. And the idea with this issue today is not to come to a resolution. It's to bring the topic forward as an issue that's taking place, and then move on forward more in depth as the interim goes on.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the committee. I am aware of the time, so I'll try to be brief. My name is Ryan Donmoyer. I'm a resident of Purcellville in Loudoun County, and I've lived in Virginia for 30 years. Thank you for the opportunity today to share my experience with renters insurance compliance policies that are often forced on tenants who have secured their own cheaper, superior coverage. Before I begin, I want to be clear that I'm not an expert in housing, nor am I an expert in insurance. I do have a background as a financial journalist. My daughter, Zoe, has just finished her sophomore year at Virginia Tech. Since August, she has lived in an off-campus housing at the Union, an apartment complex near the campus. I am a guarantor on her lease, which expires in July. The Union is a fine complex for a student to live in. However, like many other complexes serving university students, and from what I gather, other tenants statewide, it employs some dubious financial practices. There are a bunch of them, but today I want to focus on this renters and compliance insurance policy. So we spent months trying to get an insurance policy imposed on us by the apartment complex, despite the fact that we had procured our own from State Farm. I've been a State Farm policyholder for 40 years. And and it's perfectly reasonable for landlords to require tenants to have renters insurance. I mean, it's prudent for the tenant, right? The landlord has a desire to protect its assets, where the tenants need to protect their belongings and indemnify potential liabilities. The union's renters insurance compliance policies are issued by Assurant and underwritten by the American Bankers Insurance Company of Florida. Assurant identifies itself in regulatory filings as, quote, the market leader in lender-placed insurance. You may be more familiar with Assurant as a provider of the replacement insurance you may be offered when you buy a new cell phone. When we signed Zoe's lease, one of my first calls was to my State Farm agent. I provided them the details he needed. He sent me a policy. I paid the annual premium. On July 31st, 2024, we uploaded the declarations page to the union's tenant portal, and I thought everything was settled. And the State Farm policy was going to cover Zoe, and it does cover Zoe from August 1st of 2024 until August 1st of this year. So imagine my surprise a month later when the union billed us for renter's insurance monthly premium. I assumed it was a mistake. So Zoe called the union. We were told there was an error in the declarations page of the State Farm policy. That mistake? The State Farm policy failed to list the interested party as required in the lease and also listed the union's corporate office address instead of Zoe's building address, which was a difference of a single digit. We fixed the interested party information and uploaded the policy again on August 19th. Zoe received an email from the union telling us that we were good to go. The next month, the union billed us again for a monthly insurance premium. The problem this time, the State Farm policy still listed the union's corporate address instead of Zoe's building address. You need to understand that the leasing address is literally across a parking lot from the building, right? So we revised the State Farm policy again and uploaded it again to the portal of the apartment complex. Another month, another bill for the Assurant policy. This time, I was told that the State Farm policy was rejected because it listed Zoe's apartment as, quote, Unit 239-C, which is the United States Postal Service address, instead of, quote, Apartment 239. At this point, I became exasperated and I filed a complaint with the State Corporations Commission Bureau of Insurance. In their response, Assurant cited all of the above that I just shared with you. It also quoted Zoe's lease, which I found odd since neither Assurant nor the American Bankers Insurance Company of America were parties to the lease. But the representative from the BOI told me that ultimately there was nothing they could do and suggested I reach out to the legislature. So I contacted my state senator, Russell Perry, whose office recommended contacting the Virginia Housing Commission, and that's how I came to be here before you today. Ultimately, to resolve this issue, I was forced to interact directly with Assurant, a company that I never consented to do business with. This required me to create an account on their website, which involved sharing personal information. By late November, we had revised the State Farm policy for the third or the fourth time, this time to their satisfaction. Maybe because I complained to the Bureau of Insurance and it became clear to them that I was going to continue to pursue this. Assurant directed the union to refund 4 months of premiums we had been forced to pay to date. I have several observations from this experience to share with you and a few courses of action for you to consider. First, the Assurant policy premiums were roughly 50% higher on an annual basis than the State Farm policy. Moreover, the Assurant policy only protects the landlord. It doesn't cover tenants' personal property. I understand this to be a standard business model for renters insurance compliant policies, by the way, but ultimately tenants are being forced to pay for insurance that only protects the landlord's assets. This doesn't seem right. The companies should be insuring themselves at the cost of doing business. I should note that 50% higher premium cost is a little disguised by the monthly payment structure. Someone who hasn't comparison shop might not even notice or think it's that high, but when you multiply that by hundreds, if not thousands of tenants in buildings or hundreds of thousands of tenants in Virginia apartments, that adds up to real money for the insurance companies and the landlords. Second, speaking of real money, renters compliance insurance is marketed to apartment complexes and their owners as a way to increase their revenues. Assurant, for example, tells landlords using their renters insurance compliance program, quote, increases ancillary revenue with ease of resident opt-in or embedded enrollment. One of their competitors, Ohio-based Foxen, tells landlords that they can, quote, maximize income and, quote, earn new revenue when you refer clients to Foxen's renters insurance compliance or rent reporting programs. Note that rent reporting has to do with personal credit scores, and that's another whole issue, but some of them are charging from that as well. Third, the capricious way in which Assurant made it difficult to remove their policy appears to be part of their business model. My State Farm agent told me in August, after the first rejection, that these practices are notorious in the insurance industry. Quote, it's a little scammy, he told me. They don't make it clear that the interested party needs to be listed, and then they threaten to force a policy on you if you don't take action to get the updated declaration page to them. Then, if one period is off, they reject it. It's worth noting that it's exactly what happened to us over the next 2 or 3 months. Fourth, it's incredibly odd and inappropriate that Assurant was able to quote lease language in its response to my complaint to the BOI. I would be curious to know whether they are actually dictating such language to landlords. If they are, that does strike me as a conflict of interest. Fifth, no one should be forced to do business with a company it doesn't want to do business with. The entire business model here appears to be the imposition of unwanted policies on tenants and then to make it very difficult for them to get rid of them. They're either counting on tenants' ignorance or deciding they don't have the energy or resources to fight it. It's essentially a war of attrition. I think that's wrong. Now, I was an investigative journalist for much of my career, so I can recognize injustice and deception. Moreover, I have the skills and the tenacity to advocate for myself should I or my family be the target of these kinds of practices. Most people would just let these things go, and that's what they're counting on. So some serious thought should be given to developing legislation that more rigidly regulates these products and protects Virginia's tenants. At the very least, such legislation should strive to accomplish the following things. One, require any renter's insurance compliance policies imposed on tenants to offer comprehensive protection to tenants' personal property. This would have the effect of increasing premium costs, but that's not necessarily a bad thing if it results in more price transparency. Second, require more transparency and disclosure about what these policies do and do not cover, both for landlords and for tenants themselves. These disclosures should be required to be in plain, easily understood language. They should be required to explicitly advise tenants that it's likely they can obtain better and cheaper insurance from other providers. And they should make it easier for tenants to opt out of these policies by prohibiting the types of breadcrumbing hurdles these companies erect when tenants try to substitute their own policies. And tenants should not file a complaint with regulators like I did to get satisfaction. Thank you for listening to my story. I'd be happy to answer any questions you have about my experience.
Thank you, Mr. Don Moyer. I sincerely appreciate your testimony, recognizing that it is noon, and we sincerely appreciate you for staying around for today's work group meeting. I do want to be mindful of the fact that this is an introduction of the topic. By no means are we planning to take action today, but we appreciate you sharing your experience and the experience of your particular student and outlining 3 areas and opportunities for the state to weigh in. With that being said, I am going to turn the mic over to Ms. Ahmed, who will gladly take to the lectern and provide some additional insight on behalf of the Apartment and Office Building Association of Metropolitan Washington. And while she gets set up, I'm actually going to turn it over to Ms. Paulin, so she can introduce the subject, but more importantly, ask a quick question of Mr. Don Moyer.
I think we're set on that. I just wanted to make sure that everybody knew that we weren't dealing with one insurance company or a particular constituent, that we were looking at the larger issue, but our speaker outlined those at the end of his talk. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Ms. Ahmed?
Yeah, good afternoon, Madam Chair, members of the committee. Thanks for having me on here today. And just to reiterate some of the testimony that I've given prior, during the session, we definitely promote transparency and clarity for renters when they're going through the process, but we haven't heard from our members that this is an issue per se, especially between tenants. But I want to offer a few key points here. Landlords and housing providers already have clear responsibilities in Virginia law when it comes to renters insurance. So, if a landlord chooses to obtain renters insurance on behalf of a tenant, they already have they have to be legally required to provide written notice that the tenant has the right to secure their own policy, accept valid proof of separate coverage from the tenant, offer a summary of the coverage provided, and ensure that the tenant is listed as an insured party on the landlord-provided policy. So that's current law. Second, this was mentioned before, but if the concern is about the lack of clarity around the fees, just last session we worked to address this issue. It's a bill that we worked on for 2 years to get right. It was from Delegate Marcus Simon, HB 2430, essentially requiring all fees to be itemized and clearly listed at the beginning of the lease agreement. That passed unanimously through committee. It struck a balance between transparency for the tenant and then also allowing property owners, managers to operate efficiently. So we have really worked to make sure that tenants know exactly what they're being charged. And landlords are already being required to accept valid renters insurance coverage from tenants. And so although we have seen instances where tenants do submit incomplete documents, or the coverage doesn't meet the lease terms, or sometimes policies lapse without notice to the housing provider. So it's not unreasonable to request clear and complete documentation. We want to make sure that valid coverage stays in place. And that's good risk management for everybody involved. So we're open to discussing any best practices or improving communication between landlords and tenants. However, existing law already addresses a lot of these concerns raised. We support tenants' choice to obtaining their own coverage, any transparency about fees and charges, and we have addressed that through legislation last session. We just don't support over-regulating a system that already protects tenants and property owners, managers. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Are there any questions or comments from members of the work group? Seeing none at this time, I will simply add, thank you for your testimony. We thank both of you. I think that we have a great opportunity by outlining 3 clear issue areas for all parties who have noted that there is a willingness to work together to identify solutions, or potentially just make sure that everyone is interpreting current law through the same lens, so that we can all work together. So we look forward to doing that at a future work group. And with that being said, I will now move on to item number 7, which is public comment. Do we have anyone in the room who wishes to provide public comment? Please state your name and the locality from which you're from. You have 2 minutes to deliver remarks.
My name is Hollis Brown, I'm a home inspector with over 25 years of experience in the Northern Virginia area. I own and operate the Home Inspector Training Academy. I provide home inspector training, entry-level home inspector training authorized through DPOR. I also represent this morning, I guess it's afternoon now, the Virginia Association of Real Estate Inspectors, the acronym VAREI, sometimes pronounced VARI, sometimes VARI. We did not come here this morning prepared to present our arguments, but we did want to add a little bit of perspective pretty quickly here. First is that the DPOR's requirement for insurance is $250,000 of general liability. There's no requirement for professional liability insurance. So the argument that we're going to solve the problem of home buyers making purchase decisions without sufficient information through litigation with the tapping into insurance is would require more than just the legislation that was proposed this morning. I have to say that I've heard this overgeneralization of the conflict of interest between home inspectors and the real estate community. I mean, I've been listening to it for decades now, and in my experience, it has little to no validity. My experience or my observation of real estate agents is that they want good home inspections performed by properly trained and proficient home inspectors. They don't want the surprises that come down the road when the people buy the house and then discover the problems. They want those problems disclosed up front. That's why they recommend competent home inspectors. Am I done?
Your 2 minutes is up, but if there is a thought you would like to complete, feel free to do so.
Let me just say this, that I believe that we're all on the same page, that we're here. I mean, I think of myself as a consumer advocate. That's why I enjoy my profession. I protect people, and I go out of my way to protect home buyers from making poor home purchase decisions. And I don't believe that more litigation is the solution. I think that better training and more experience is the solution. If we want to address this issue, I would suggest that we look at the license law, not more litigation. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And if you don't mind leaving your contact information with staff down front, we would greatly appreciate it as we look forward to continuing this conversation. Seeing no further comments or questions from members of the work group, today's meeting is adjourned.
Senate of Virginia, Richmond, Virginia. Senate Committee Room, C-311. Did you know live Senate video is now available at youtube.com/@Senate of Virginia. Senate Committee Room, C311.